What would you do if your HOA president demanded the keys to your private gate and threatened your peace when you refused? Most people laugh at such a question, saying, "That would never happen to me." But Andre Whitlow had the misfortune of living that scenario word for word, and it all began with a knock. The knock wasn't polite. It rattled the glass panel in the door, sharp and insistent, as though whoever stood outside wasn't asking to be let in, but commanding it. Andre paused mid-sip, the warmth of his coffee lingering in his mouth, frowning as he crossed the hardwood floor toward the door. Saturday mornings weren't supposed to be like this. Saturdays were for quiet, his jog along the lakeside trail, maybe a few hours of coding work from his consulting projects, and in the evening, grilling chicken while the sun sank over Lake McCusick. Nothing dramatic. But as soon as he turned the brass handle and pulled open the door, drama arrived uninvited. "Mr. Whitlow," the woman said crisply, standing tall on his porch, as though she had rehearsed her presence before arriving. Her voice was clipped, every syllable tight, every pause deliberate. She was lean, her posture straight as a ruler, with a freshly trimmed bob of blonde hair that looked as though it had been shaped with a ruler as well. Appearance was part of her language, a uniform of authority, and on the lapel of her jacket gleamed a gold HOA pin shaped like a shield, half decoration, half declaration. "I'm Joanne Prentice, president of the Lakeshore Association," she said, without waiting for Andre to ask. She wasn't introducing herself, she was announcing herself. Andre blinked once, lowering his coffee cup slowly. "Okay," he said carefully, "we need a copy of your back gate key. Today." Joanne continued, as if she were giving a deadline to a subordinate. Andre tilted his head slightly. "Excuse me, the gate on your property, the one that leads directly to the lake." Her tone had not softened. "You'll provide us with a key so board members and any resident who needs quicker access can use it. It's only fair." Andre shifted his weight, resting his free hand against the doorframe. His gate, his yard, his deeded land, and now apparently his new neighbor, the HOA president, was treating it like community property. "With all respect," Andre said slowly, his voice even, "that gate is part of my yard. It's private, not community property." Joanna crossed her arms, lips curling into a smirk so slight it was almost a sneer. "That gate is the shortest route to the lake. You can't keep it locked up just because you feel like it. The community expects cooperation." Cooperation. That word struck Andre like a sour note. It didn't sound like community. It sounded like command. He held her stare, calm, measured. "I bought this home because of the privacy. That gate isn't under your jurisdiction." Her smile thinned, the edges sharpening like glass. "You really want to be the neighbor who refuses to share. That's the reputation you're going to start with here." Andre didn't respond immediately. Instead, his eyes drifted past her shoulder, toward the ripple of the lake beyond his fence line. He had moved here for that view, for the sound of the water against the shore, for the air that wasn't filled with the honking of city traffic or the endless beeping of notifications. This was supposed to be his sanctuary, his reward after years of airports, deadlines, and conference calls. And now, before he had even settled in, someone was at his door trying to claim the one boundary that meant the most. Finally, he looked back at her, his tone steady. "I won't be giving out my key." The porch went quiet. The only sound was the soft shifting of his dog inside, nails clicking against the wood floor as though sensing the tension. Joanna's jaw tightened, working as if she wanted to spit words she couldn't shape fast enough. "You're making this difficult," she muttered. "The board won't be pleased. Think about that." And with that, She pivoted on her heel, her footsteps snapping against the concrete path like punctuation marks, each one final and sharp. Andre closed the door slowly and leaned against it, letting out the breath he had been holding. His mother's old advice from years ago whispered in his mind, "Stand firm on what's yours, or people will decide for you." He hadn't expected to be tested on that lesson so soon. That afternoon, while trimming hedges near the back fence, he noticed neighbors pausing as they walked past. Some glanced toward his gate. Others offered polite smiles, then kept moving. It didn't take much imagination to know word was already spreading. And when word spreads in a close, knit neighborhood, it rarely does so in your favor. That night, sitting on his deck with a beer in hand, he replayed the knock. The clipped voice, the smirk, a stranger demanding that the one thing he valued most, his boundary, be surrendered for cooperation. It didn't feel like the end of it. No, it felt like the beginning of something heavier, and deep down, Andre knew it was only a matter of time before that knock returned. And he was right, because 1 week later, Joanne came back. But before that moment, you need to understand why Andre chose this place in the first place, and why that gate meant more than just a fence with a lock. Andre hadn't ended up in Stillwater, Minnesota by accident. After 2 decades bouncing between San Francisco, Dallas, and Phoenix for work, he wanted something different. He was 44 now, and the grind had worn him down. His days were filled with coding contracts, flights, client meetings, and hotel rooms. He had money, yes, but what he didn't have was peace. A friend had once told him, "You can make money anywhere, but peace, that's harder to find." That line stuck with him. So when he first saw the brick home on Lake McCusick Drive, with its small backyard sloping down to the water and its wrought iron gate separating his land from the lake, he felt a click inside, the kind you don't question. On the day he signed the papers, he stood at that gate with his hand on the cool iron handle, the water shimmering before him. "This," he whispered, "is mine." But ownership, Andre was about to learn, didn't always mean control. Not in a neighborhood like this. The Lakeshore Association had rules for everything: grass length, mailbox color, even where trash cans could sit on pickup day. Andre skimmed the handbook when he moved in, sighed at its strictness, and told himself he could live with it. He wasn't one to pick fights over cosmetic rules. He wanted his peace. The first week, neighbors trickled by with baked goods and polite smiles. Ronald and Beverly Greer, a retired couple down the street, brought banana bread and asked if he liked to fish. A younger couple, Illy and Sandra Klein, mentioned the HOA was a bit strict, but manageable if you play along. Andre chuckled, "Then I'm not worried." He should have been, because nobody mentioned Joanne Prentice. Sandra later told him Joanne had only recently been elected HOA president. She ran on a platform of community unity and streamlining lake access. Most people had shrugged and voted for her, who didn't want easier access to the lake. But Joanne didn't see it as harmless. For her, it was about control, and Andre's gate was the obstacle standing in her way. Within weeks, gossip began to circle. Andre overheard neighbors chatting about the new guy and the locked gate. When he stepped outside, their voices went quiet. Polite smiles spread too quickly, groups dispersed. He was no fool. He knew when a narrative was forming, and Joanne was the one shaping it. The irony was that Andre didn't even mind people using the lake. If neighbors asked politely, he might have let them pass through when he was around, but the demand, that was different. The demand was about power. One morning, while grabbing coffee downtown, he ran into Ronald Greer. The older man leaned in with a hushed warning. "Word of advice, son. Don't get on Joanne's bad side. She's got pull with the board. Folks around here don't like waves." Andre smiled faintly. "Ronald, I didn't move here to stir waves, but I didn't move here to get pushed around either. Ronald gave him a long look, then patted his shoulder. Just be careful. The words stuck with Andre, not the warning itself, but the tone, half concern, half resignation, as if Joanne had already won battles like this before. That evening, Andre walked to the gate again. He ran his hand along the iron lock, feeling its weight. This wasn't about convenience or shortcuts. It was about principle. It was about boundaries. He whispered again the words he had spoken the day he bought the place. This is mine. But even as he said it, he knew someone else was already plotting how to take it away, and he was right, because when Joanne showed up again, this time with backup, it became clear that saying no wasn't enough. It was only the opening move in a much bigger battle. The second knock came on a Wednesday afternoon, just as Andre was finishing a virtual meeting with a client in Seattle. He muted his microphone, closed his laptop, and rubbed his temples. Work was draining, but at least it was predictable. The knock at the door wasn't. This time it wasn't Joanne standing alone. Through the frosted glass panel, Andre could see 3 distinct shadows. When he opened the door, there she was again, Joanne, the president, with her stiff bob and stiffer posture. But now she had 2 men with her. Both wore polo shirts with the HOA logo embroidered neatly over the left breast. One was tall and heavyset, his arms crossed over a belly that stretched the fabric tight. The other was younger, wiry, with a clipboard tucked against his chest like a shield. "Good afternoon, Mr. Whitlow," Joanne said, her voice dipped in fake sweetness. "We've come to resolve the matter of the gate." Andre leaned against the doorframe, his face calm but his chest tightening. "There is no matter. We resolved it last week. My property, my key." The heavy-set man chuckled, low and condescending. "That's not how this works. You can't just block community access. It's selfish." Selfish? Andre's voice was calm but sharpened at the edges. Buying land, paying taxes, and keeping a fence locked is selfish. The wiry man glanced at his clipboard, then chimed in. "We've had multiple complaints filed about restricted access. The board has voted unanimously that the gate should be shared." Andre's eyes flicked to Joanne. She didn't flinch. "So this is what you do? Call votes on property that doesn't belong to you?" Joanne's lips curved in that same tight smirk. "Sometimes it takes a majority to remind the minority of their obligations to the community." The words hung heavy in the air. Majority, minority, they weren't just about numbers. They carried another weight, another history, one Andre knew too well. He stepped forward, his voice low. "My deed doesn't list the HOA as co-owners. The gate stays locked." The heavy-set man's arms dropped to his sides, fists clenching slightly. "Careful, son, don't make this harder than it needs to be." Andre caught the word, son. He hadn't been called that since he was a teenager in Alabama, and back then it had never been friendly. He straightened, his presence filling the doorway. "Conversation's over," he said firmly, and started to close the door. But Joanne's hand shot out, palm flat against the wood. "If you refuse to cooperate, Mr. Whitlow, we'll take further action." Andre's eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me? I'm informing you," Joanne replied smoothly. "The board can issue fines, liens, even legal action. We'll see if your pride is worth the trouble." Andre pushed the door shut slowly, forcing her hand back, and locked it with a click. He stood in silence, listening as their footsteps retreated, voices muttering on the path. His pulse thudded in his ears. Trouble, that's what she wanted. Trouble until he bent. That night, Andre sat at the kitchen table, the HOA handbook spread open like a playbook for control. He flipped through its dense pages, scanning lines about lawn care, exterior paint, noise restrictions, but nowhere did it mention gates that opened onto private lake front property. He checked twice. 3 times, nothing. He leaned back in his chair and exhaled. They had no legal ground, not yet, but that didn't mean they'd stop. By Friday, things started to shift. Neighbors who once waved now looked away. Some muttered under their breath as Andre jogged past in the mornings. A few crossed the street entirely. At the grocery store, he caught whispers, "That's him," followed by pointed stares. He knew the tactic. Isolation. Turn the neighborhood cold until compliance feels easier than resistance. Joanne wasn't just the president of an HOA. She was the curator of whispers, the director of social pressure. Andre refused to bend. But the pressure was real. On Saturday, he returned from a run to find a bright yellow notice taped to his door. HOA violation, warning failure to provide access to community lake front via your property gate. Immediate compliance required. Andre tore it down, crumpled it in his fist, and threw it into the trash. His dog barked sharply, pacing near the back door as though sensing his owner's anger. That evening, his phone buzzed with a call from Sandra Klein, the younger neighbor who had warned him about Joanne weeks before. "Andre," she whispered, her voice urgent. "I shouldn't be calling, but Joanne had a meeting this morning. She told everyone you're breaking the bylaws. She said if you don't hand over the key, they'll fine you thousands." Andre sighed. "Sandra, there's no bylaw about private gates." "I know," she said quickly. "But people believe her. They think you're hoarding the lake. They're angry." Andre rubbed his forehead. "Why are you telling me this?" A pause, then softer. "Because it's wrong. You bought that land. You deserve your peace." Andre thanked her and hung up, a flicker of gratitude breaking through his frustration. Not everyone had turned cold, but how long until kindness cost Sandra something too? The next escalation came sooner than expected. On Monday morning, Andre opened his blinds and froze. Standing at his back fence were 3 HOA members, clipboards in hand, pointing at his gate. One jiggled the handle, testing the lock. Another snapped a photo. Andre stormed out the back door, voice booming across the yard. "Step off my property." The men glanced at him, unfazed. "We're conducting an inspection." One said, "Inspection of what?" Andre shot back. "This isn't your land." They scribbled notes, muttered to each other, then slowly filed out through the side alley as if they'd done nothing wrong. Andre stood at the gate, jaw clenched, the iron lock cool beneath his palm. They weren't even pretending anymore. This was harassment. That evening, as the sun dipped low, another knock came. When Andre opened the door, he didn't find Joanne. He found 2 uniformed police officers. "Good evening, sir," the taller one said politely. "We've had a call about a disturbance. Neighbors reported a homeowner threatening HOA officials." Andre's mouth dropped open in disbelief. "What? Do you mind if we step inside to talk?" Andre hesitated, then stepped aside. As they entered, he caught sight of Joanne across the street, standing with her arms crossed, watching. She had made her move. The officers sat at his table, not unkind but firm. "We understand there's tension about a gate. We're here to de-escalate before things get worse." Andre explained everything. His deed, the handbook, the harassment, the attempted trespass. The officers exchanged glances. "Look," the shorter one said, "this isn't a police matter yet. It's civil. But if they keep stepping onto your property, that's trespassing. Call us. Document everything." Andre nodded slowly, relief mixing with simmering anger. At least the law was still the law. When the officers left, Joanne's eyes followed them down the street. For the first time, Andre thought he saw her smirk falter. Just slightly, and in that flicker, Andre realized something important. She was pushing boundaries, yes, but she hadn't expected pushback. She wanted his key, she wanted control, but what she didn't want, what she feared, was the sight of police standing at her door. Andre closed his gate that night with a sense of finality. The battle wasn't over, it had only begun, and next time he wouldn't just defend, he'd be ready to strike back. The call came late on a Thursday evening, and it wasn't the kind of call Andre had expected. He was on his deck, the lake glimmering beneath a blanket of stars, when his phone buzzed. The screen lit up with an unfamiliar number. For a moment, he considered letting it go to voicemail, but something in his gut told him to answer. "Hello," a pause, then a nervous voice. "Mr. Whitlow, this is Harold Jensen. I'm on the HOA board." Andre sat forward, eyebrows raised. "All right, Harold, what's this about?" A shaky exhale crackled through the line. "Listen, I probably shouldn't be calling, but I've got to tell you. Joanne's pushing things too far. She's got the board convinced you're violating community rules, but there's nothing in the bylaws about your gate. She's making things up, and now what?" Andre pressed. "She's drafting a lien threat. If you don't hand over a key, she wants to hit you with legal action. It's all intimidation. She's counting on you folding before you fight." Andre clenched his jaw. "Why are you telling me this, Harold?" Another pause, quieter this time. "Because it's wrong, and because if she can do it to you, she can do it to any of us. I'm tired of watching her run this place like a queen." Andre's voice softened. "Then stand up with me." Harold hesitated, then sighed. "I can't, not yet, but I thought you should know. Document everything, protect yourself." The line clicked dead. Andre sat in silence, staring at the dark water. The call confirmed what he already knew. Joanne wasn't just bluffing. She was building a case, or at least pretending to. And unless he pushed back, she would keep escalating. That night, Andre made a decision. Defense wasn't enough anymore. It was time to go on the offensive. The next morning, Andre was up early. He walked the perimeter of his property with his phone in hand, recording video of the gate, the fence line, and the posted private property no trespassing sign he installed overnight. He snapped photos of the crumpled violation notices, the footprints near his back fence, the clipboard, wielding men snooping without permission. Every detail mattered now. By noon, he had scanned his deed, circled the property lines, and printed copies. He highlighted the section explicitly noting his exclusive lake front access. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation, and it paid off sooner than expected. That weekend, Andre returned from the grocery store to find another bright notice taped to his door. Final warning: failure to provide HOA with access to the lake gate will result in legal and financial action. Immediate compliance is expected. Andre didn't crumple this one. Instead, he smoothed it flat on the counter, photographed it, and filed it neatly in a folder labeled evidence. When the knock came 2 hours later, Andre was ready. Joanne stood on his porch again, but this time she had brought backup. 4 board members clustered behind her, their expressions self-righteous, clipboards in hand like weapons of bureaucracy. "Mr. Whitlow," Joanne began, her voice dripping with authority, "this is your last chance to avoid consequences. Hand over the key, and we can put this unpleasantness behind us." Andre opened the door wide, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. "I don't think so. But while you're here, why don't you all step off my porch before I call the police for trespassing?" One of the board members scoffed, You can't threaten us. We're the HOA. Andre smiled faintly. And I'm the homeowner. Which one do you think the law cares about? The heavy-set man from before muttered, You're making a mistake, son. Andre's patience snapped. His voice rose, steady and commanding. Don't call me son. I'm not your boy. I own this property, and you don't touch it without my permission. The porch went quiet. Joanne's lips pressed into a thin line, but her eyes flickered, just briefly, with something Andre recognized. Not power, not certainty, fear, because he wasn't bending. She huffed and turned on her heel, the board shuffling after her like a pack of uneasy soldiers. As they walked away, Andre pulled out his phone, lifted it deliberately, and filmed their retreat. Joanne glanced back, saw the red recording light, and her face hardened. The tide was turning. Andre didn't waste time. That evening, he compiled his evidence into a neat folder and sent it to a local attorney specializing in property disputes. He explained the harassment, the false notices, the attempted trespass. The attorney responded within hours, They have no legal authority over your gate. If they escalate further, we'll file a cease and desist. Andre exhaled deeply, a weight lifting from his chest. He wasn't alone anymore, but the HOA didn't know that yet. 2 days later, it all came to a head. Andre was mowing his lawn when a police cruiser rolled slowly down the street. It stopped at Joanne's house, lights flashing softly. 2 officers stepped out, heading up her driveway. Curious, Andre cut the engine and leaned on the mower handle, watching. Moments later, shouting erupted. Joanne's voice, high and sharp, carried down the block. This is ridiculous. He's the problem, not me. Andre couldn't hear the officer's reply, but he could see their stance, calm, professional, unyielding. Within minutes, one officer turned and walked straight toward Andre. Mr. Whitlow, he called. Andre straightened. That's me. The officer stopped at the edge of his lawn, his tone respectful. We've had multiple complaints filed by the HOA against you, but after reviewing the situation, we've determined they're unfounded. In fact, he pulled a small notepad from his pocket. We've also received a counter-complaint about harassment. We needed to speak with Mrs. Prentice about trespassing and issuing false violation notices. Andre blinked, surprised. Counter-complaint? The officer nodded. Seems someone on the board isn't happy with how things are being handled. They gave us plenty of details. Harold, it had to be Harold. Across the street, Joanne's voice rose again. You can't side with him. He's refusing to cooperate. The officer's radio crackled, but his response was calm. Ma'am, refusing to give up private property isn't a crime, but harassment is. Consider this a warning. Andre watched as the officers wrapped up their conversation with Joanne. Her face was red, her hands gesturing wildly, but in the end, she was left standing alone on her porch as the cruiser pulled away. Neighbors peeked through blinds and cracked doors, whispering. For the first time, the spotlight was on her, not him. Andre felt a strange mix of relief and resolve. The balance had shifted. He wasn't the one being targeted anymore. Joanne was. That night, as Andre sat on his deck, the sound of the lake lapping against the shore, he realized something deeper. This battle wasn't just about a gate. It was about dignity, boundaries, standing firm when someone tried to strip away what was yours. And in that moment, he knew Joanne might keep trying, but she would never win, because the law and the truth were on his side.
If you liked this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with others so they can learn something from it too.